G'day everybody and welcome to Shed Gospel. It's Nigel Woolley and I'm going to join with you this evening. It's actually pretty late at night. It's 11:30 at night and I've had a few thoughts on my mind over the Christmas break here that I'm just going to share with you, and I do believe talking about a way to actually get some forward movement beyond just being educated. I think getting educated, we're all getting educated on our Constitution and whatever's in our Constitution, it's on our side. It's actually our Constitution, isn't it? It's not our Parliament's Constitution. It's our Constitution that gives them the powers to do what they do, enumerates their powers, and it's the will of the people that is being written down, in a sort of like a quasi sovereign document, and just this evening I thought I've been busy at my computer tonight, actually getting a little bit of time to jot some stuff down, which I'm going to just explain to you in this video, and I hope you'll join with me and have a look at what I'm looking at here. But in terms of doubting the powers, I've titled this video called Doubting the Powers. Really, I believe that's a strategy. I don't know if I'm hearing from God here, but just as a strategy about, waking people up. We talk about educating people on our Constitution and what have you, but actually doubting the powers. It's actually a practical step that we can do. Begin to ask questions of authorities, if they're actually standing lawfully doing what they're doing, they're only going to be too happy to tell you what their lawful basis is. If they've got nothing to hide, and if they're not bullies, they're going to be only too happy to tell you how they derive their powers, But if they are standing unlawfully, or if they are claiming powers that is beyond the powers granted, then I believe, and I've seen, that they get cagey or they get huffy, They start having a problem with you asking questions about their lawful basis to tell you what to do, And you have every lawful right to actually begin to doubt the powers and to question authorities, You don't have to be there campaigning in great rebellion. You can just begin to ask questions. And I think that the truth, the Bible says, Jesus himself said, "Ye shall know the truth. If you continue in my word, then are you my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free." So really, if they're standing without any powers lawfully to do so, then knowing the truth about how they stand is going to set you free, isn't it? And I've always thought the whole thing here, the whole thing here really is sorting out who's who. We've got to know who's on our side. The whole thing about enemies, foreign and domestic, is really the challenge here today. It's all too easy to see China as a threat, as far as an external nation's concerned. But do we have any enemies within? Do we have anyone who's overstepping their bounds, or using the freedoms that they've been given or enumerated powers that they've been given, but taking that far too many steps beyond the powers granted? Daniel Andrews is a classic one, but the Victorian police are another classic one, And in researching this myself, I began to just honestly get irate. Righteously angry, I would say, righteously angry at these people that are sitting there on government money, supposed to be doing the will of the people, but in fact they're using their position to dominate and overlord people and to put people in a position of fear. Are you paying them to do that for you? If you're not happy about it, then say something, tell them that they're not representing you. But, you have every right to doubt the powers. And I've gotten here, in our society here in Australia, because we have, my word for it would be a democratic society. My view of democracy is that you get to elect, because you have been viewed as a sovereign citizen type thing, a supreme person. I don't know if democracy is exactly the right word. Definitely we're in a constitutional monarchy, here in Australia. But, part of our job as citizens is that we have to know our system that we have been given. Not just trust these creeps to be able to run along and manage it all for us and expect that they are being held accountable by each other. What if they're all in the same boat together? What if they're two wings of the same bird? They are, really. But you, as just a everyday Joe, can begin to doubt the powers, begin to ask them questions. And I've actually found some stuff that I'm going to share today in some dot points, but reasons to doubt the powers. I wrote down some reasons why I would doubt the powers. If powers were not conferred by the people to the Parliament via the Constitution or referendum, wouldn't that be a great reason to doubt the powers? That if we've never actually enumerated to them the powers that they're claiming to have, but we've never actually conferred it to them. What about state of emergency, state of disaster? Some of these other things that seem to be nation-changing states that they can, claim state of emergency, a state of disaster, at the moment seems to be a way of bypassing all due process or any red tape and just funneling funds into areas. But the danger with all that is it's not actually an enumerated power that the people have given our Parliament to use. And could they actually use it for evil? Yes, So, another reason to doubt the powers is if laws created are claiming some power that was never conferred to the Parliament to make the law with. Another reason to doubt the power is if the law is actually unconstitutional, because our Constitution in Australia is the highest law in Australia, isn't it? If the law of the state is inconsistent with the Constitution or a law of the federal. That's another reason to doubt the powers. So if, say, a state makes a law, say Daniel Andrews makes some law down there that contradicts the Constitution, our Commonwealth Constitution, or it contradicts a law of the federal. Say you have human rights protections in the Human Rights Commission Act, but Daniel Andrews is saying, no, you can't have them at the moment, His law that he's created or attempting to create or supposedly has even passed, even if everyone had all agreed to it, the law itself or the degree at which it transgresses the law of the federal or the Constitution, that bit is unlawful. And you can doubt the powers of that. You can actually afford it no obedience. If another reason to doubt the powers is if the members of Parliament haven't sworn the lawful oath. They actually have no crown powers to act. So if they haven't sworn the oath that's in the schedule of the Constitution, in the form that it's been given there, if they haven't sworn that lawful oath, then they are not actually a sitting member and not a lawfully sitting member of Parliament. So even if some Governor General said, oh, that's okay, I know him, he's a good bloke, then the fact that they have not sworn the lawful oath is not okay with you or with me. If they have to be held to the Constitution, if our Constitution has given forth the form of oath that they have to swear the lawful oath to, but they don't, or they haven't even come back to the people and said, look, for some reason the oath that's in the Constitution doesn't suit the actual status of what we are now, we need to change it. Can we put it to referendum, guys? Can we get the people's buy-in to change the Constitution here and update the oath? If they'd done that, that would be understandable and the people would get to have their say. But because they don't swear the lawful oath, as it's set forth in the Constitution, they swear by the Queen of Australia, it's actually not in the Constitution. That hasn't been updated. It hasn't been changed. So any presumption that they're making to swear the lawful oath by the Queen of Australia has been nothing that we've ever agreed to. So they have no power to just make up any oath of allegiance that they want to. And you go and have a look further back and it gets way worse. is because people like Julia Gillard and some of these other ones actually swore an oath to the people of Australia, or Bob Carr swore an oath to the people of New South Wales, not to the Queen, but just to the people. And this stuff has to get audited properly, and it has to, because within that, as you look at who's actually sworn the lawful oath or not, why haven't they sworn the lawful oath? And herein becomes a really great question. Who are they in allegiance to? Are they serving a foreign power? What's their objection to swearing our lawful oath? And should they be actually sworn in? Should they be actually allowed to be in our parliament giving their vote or doing what they do? They're allowed to sit, I think, but they can't do anything. They're allowed to sit like as an observer, but they have no powers if they don't actually swear the lawful oath. So that's what I understand of it. But here's the thing, is that we have all of these people now in there that haven't sworn the lawful oath, particularly even in Victoria, where you can see that they have even changed their oath in Victoria, in the oath of office for parliamentarians sitting in Victoria, that have actually removed the name of the monarch, and they don't swear the name. All of it's just garbage. So why are they... why have they done that? What's the agenda here to remove the Queen? And if they are actually sitting unlawfully, or if there's an agenda there to remove the Queen as a head of power, then what lawful basis do they have to sign off on any of their laws? And do the laws even apply to us? I don't think they do. If we're under the Queen from the Constitution, but they have moved away from being under the Queen and have basically tried to depose her in the law and are sitting unlawfully, then how do their laws actually apply to us who are subjects of the Queen? You see what I'm saying? It's just, they're actually cutting the lawful basis out from under themselves. It's not our problem. It is our problem in the sense that we've delegated them these powers and they're abusing it. But the fact that they are not sitting lawfully and making laws that actually truly don't apply to us, or laws that we can doubt, is actually a legislative nightmare that's actually their problem. It shouldn't be pressure on us. It's their problem. So, in talking about reasons to doubt the powers, if any members of the House of Representatives or the Senate are sitting unlawfully, such as if they have foreign interests or allegiances to foreign powers. Isn't this a big one? Classic example, Greg Hunt. I don't know his position, but Greg Hunt, our health minister, has a photo on, I think it was his Facebook profile, but certainly some have magnified the photo, and on his bookshelf shows COVID-19, The Great Reset, book by Klaus Schwab, who's the head honcho of the World Economic Forum, And so in terms of foreign powers, who's Greg Hunt's allegiances to as our foreign minister? And COVID-19 being like a, supposed health emergency, but if it's going to provide a financial gateway into reshaping our countries and getting rid of capitalism, bringing in communism, then that's actually treason. He's a traitor to our country. In New South Wales, as I've done other videos, there's Brad Hazzard, our health minister, has said twice. He said, New World Order of COVID. COVID's the New World Order. We just need to get used to it. And really, he said that twice in two separate Sky News interviews, or Sky News recordings of his press conferences. And this should be red flags to us as people of the Commonwealth, that we have people in public office that we're paying their bills, but yet are serving a foreign power or have allegiances outside of Australia. Daniel Andrews, with all of his Belt and Road deals, that was signing up Victoria to Belt and Road initiatives. He has no business to do that whatsoever, And the man that does that, you have every reason to doubt his powers whatsoever, Anything he says, you can doubt it. You can question it, and you should be. Because if we don't, then we're just going to be sitting ducks and going down very quietly and subjecting ourselves to some agenda that we have no idea where it's going. We have had no consultation as to where this is leading or what these guys are wanting to do on our behalf. And they're turning from public servants to public masters, even though they're still public servants, you know. So we have every reason to doubt the powers, and you must. So, if any members of the House of Representatives or the Senate are sitting unlawfully, such as if they have foreign interests or allegiances to foreign powers, you must doubt what they're saying. You must question what they're saying. You must ask them or go back to it and find out, well, look, are these people actually on our side? I don't want to obey a law that this person's just invented or put to our parliament or signed off on if he's sitting in treason. You know, and actually we have every right. We must pay attention to enemies, foreign and domestic, you know. Domestic enemies, we have them, don't we? And these domestic people are enabling the agendas of our foreign enemies. They're acting as collaborators here on our soil, aren't they? Another reason to doubt the powers of a member who sits in the House of Reps or the Senate is if they have a pecuniary interest, if they have a financial or some personal benefit in their decisions, you know, such as financial benefit or gain. How many guys have been found out in corruption, doing dodgy deals, you know? Why do we keep having these same kinds of people? They're all covering each other's back too, these people in our parliaments, aren't they? You know, for all their financial deals. And a lot of the times when the news media finally does a story on the corruption, it's years and years and years after the fact. So it's almost like, you know, they have to disclose the truth, but it's way later than when the events are happening. And, you know, really these scumbags need to be dragged into the courts and need to be tried for treason and or pecuniary interests or false oath, perjury, you know, malfeasance, you know, misbehaving, you know, in public office. That's why we need to doubt the powers. You know, if these guys are bankrupt, we don't know their financial status, but if they are, they shouldn't be sitting as a member. Or if they are attainted or convicted of treason or other suitable crimes, you know. Here's the thing, I rang up my local police station, Cessnock Police Station, a couple of weeks ago and asked about treason, and was really interesting because the police there, the lady I spoke to actually hadn't heard of treason being in the Crimes Act, and she said, I think they took that out ages ago. And I said, well, it shouldn't be, because you've got two kinds of treason. You've got treason against the monarch, you know, Queen Elizabeth, and you've also got treason against the voter. We have to have a lawful recourse to be able to go and arrest these cronies and take them into the courts, have them under lock and key until it's sorted out in the courts as to where their allegiances lie. You know, we need to purge Australia. The only way we're going to be able to start doing this without bloodshed is by doubting the powers and putting pressure. We have to be able to put pressure on our parliamentarians and public officers. And the way we're going to do this is by showing that we have an interest in what they're doing, but we have an interest in knowing how lawful they really are, you know. So another reason to doubt the power is if any laws have been proposed or passed by members who are sitting unlawfully for the reasons above. Another reason to doubt the powers is if police, and this is a big one, if the police or the ADF are acting on unlawful laws or laws that have been passed unlawfully or by ineligible members. Isn't that a big one? You know, what if you have the legislature, like down in Victoria, unlawfully passing laws, and then, you know, we don't get to have a say on it really. Even if we do, they pass it all anyway, and then that empowers the police to go and be able to take that act of parliament that they passed to the streets and start abusing the people, you know, or unlawfully locking people up. And it's like, you have an issue with the policeman for obeying that unlawful law, but you also have this. The second thing is actually sorting out the law that's behind him, telling him what to do. And then when it goes to the courts, then the courts are going to have to judge on the legislation that was passed. And they may or may not be able to judge at that level whether that legislation is unlawful or not. It might have to go up to the Supreme Court or even to the High Court of Australia, you know. But we've got to begin today to even doubt the powers, don't we? You know, and begin to speak up and to say, look, show me how lawful you are. And this is why I've been putting all this stuff on Shed Gospel, just exposing it for you so that you can see it for yourself, begin to doubt the powers for yourself, begin to speak up, begin to make a big loud noise, you know, and let them know that you're here in Australia, that they can't take this country over by stealth, you know, that they're going to have to fess up and tell you the truth of what they're doing, you know. So may God strengthen us with this mission, because it's a big job. The other reason to doubt the powers, and this is another big one, is if the agenda, and it's not obvious, but if the agenda or the law itself is against the coronation oath agenda, which is to uphold the Bible and the church and the true profession of the gospel. Excuse me. Here's a big one. If you're not a Christian, look, I understand. God bless you. You know, that's the foundation of Australia is Christian, whether you like it or not. And as I've said before on my other videos, the Queen's role in part of her coronation, in her crowning, she went to the Church of England. She was coronated there by the Archbishop. You know, he put the crown on her head. He anointed her. He also gave her a Bible and said, "This is the laws of God. You know, this is the royal law." And so it's been told her, and she swore an oath in her coronation oath. She swore an oath to uphold the Bible and to protect the church and to protect the true profession of the gospel. You know, so that's our monarch, okay? And her powers here are represented in the Governor General and also in the governors. So if she's agreed to have them represent her, you know, they're proposed by the Parliament, and the Queen actually accepts them and says, okay, yep, you'll represent me in Australia. I think you're a good guy or lady or whoever you are, the Governor or Governor General. And they're acting as her representative. And they have the final say on the passing of a law after the parliaments have done their debating and the Senate's done their thing. The Governor or the Governor General will be able to sign off and give it the royal assent. But they also have to make sure that that law conforms to the Constitution. You know, so in section 58 of our Constitution, it says about the royal assent to bills. I'll just read that. When a proposed law passed by both houses of the Parliament is presented to the Governor-General for the Queen's assent, he shall declare, according to his discretion, but subject to this Constitution, that he assents in the Queen's name, or that he withholds assent, or that he reserves the law for the Queen's pleasure. And the other thing about the Governor-General is that he also has the executive power of the Commonwealth. In section 61 of the Constitution says that the executive power of the Commonwealth is vested in the Queen and is exercisable by the Governor-General as the Queen's representative, and extends to the execution and maintenance of this Constitution and of the laws of the Commonwealth. So we have major responsibility by governors. So this sort of thing happens at governor level as well. But we have major responsibility, say, by Linda Dessau in Victoria and other governors around the place, and also Governor General David Hurley. We have major responsibility by these guys to make sure that, well, they've committed, their constitutional commitment is that they have to make sure that the law or the bill that's been proposed to them and signed off by the Houses of Parliament is actually conforming to the Constitution. You know, so if they're signing off on some law that's against the Constitution, I wouldn't want to be in their seat, would you? I mean, these guys have the responsibility. It's all subject to this Constitution. That's what the Governor and the Governor-Generals have to do, is ensure that the legislation conforms to our Constitution. And of course, that's as far as protecting our rights and making sure that it conforms to the laws of the Commonwealth, which is through our Human Rights Commission Act as well. I mean, talking about human rights, I mean, that's a federal law. So the Governor has a big job. They can't just receive the legislation and then sign off on it and say, well, you guys did your job, didn't you? So, I'll sign it. They have a responsibility, So in terms of doubting the powers, if something that the governors or the Governor-General has passed that is actually unconstitutional, we have a major problem here in Australia, don't we? If the people in the highest offices of the land are passing laws that are against our Constitution, what do? We have to begin to doubt the powers. We have to begin to look and observe and say, look, well, how did this get past you? Are you, Governor or Governor-General, guilty of treason? This is where we need people power by the millions here in Australia. Actually begin to challenge it. But we're going to have to create a groundswell, and I think part of our strategy is definitely learning how all this works. But in part of our learning is actually doubting the powers, beginning to ask them the questions. Say, look, what's your lawful basis for this? Show me. I don't hate you, but I want you to show me your lawful basis to back up what you're saying to me here today. Are you sitting lawfully? Show me your oath. Show me how that you're not trading insolvent. Show me how that you don't have an allegiance to a foreign power. Before I do what you say, I need to just satisfy myself and my friends here that you, Minister of Parliament, whoever you are, or you policeman, or you Governor, or you Governor-General, I just want to ask the question of you, are you sitting lawfully? Where's your lawful oath? Show me a copy of it. Let me see that your oath conforms to the Constitution. And if they can't show you the oath, here's the thing, just a story for you. ScoMo, Scott Morrison, I had a problem with his swearing in oath, when he swore an oath of allegiance to Her Majesty, and he didn't stop and correct it. And it was on live TV, or it was certainly televised by the news media companies. And he said, Her Majesty, the Queen of Australia. And back at that stage, I didn't even pick up the fact that swearing an oath to the Queen of Australia was not even conforming to the form of oath in our Constitution. Back at that stage, I just noticed that he'd said Her Majesty and hadn't corrected it. And I sent Scott an email asking, can I please have a copy of your oath? Let me see. Did you actually say Her Majesty, or was it a slip of the tongue? If it was a slip of the tongue, why didn't you go back and correct it? Her Majesty could mean something that I don't know what it means, And in a sense, playing dumb is part of your strategy that you can use to put pressure back on these people and just say, look, I don't mind hearing from you, but I want to see it for myself, please. Show me a copy of your oath. Anyway, I sent this stuff to ScoMo's department and have heard nothing, even though they have 28 days, I think, to reply to me. They haven't replied at all. I've tried all this stuff on his Facebook, on his open feed there on Facebook, and made it very, very public, and I've done it several times, screenshotted it and told him that I'd screenshotted it. And next thing you know, I'm actually blocked from commenting on his page. And I didn't abuse him. I didn't call him any name under the sun. I just was questioning his lawful standing. And because he swore an oath with our Governor-General, Sir David Hurley, I just sent an email off to the Governor-General's department and I said, look, can I please have a copy of Scott Morrison's oath, figuring that he would have a duplicate. He was right there. He was the one taking the oath with Scott, from Scott, And so I got an email back, like I think it was 3 months after I'd sent my original contact with the Governor General's office and the email that I'd sent off. It was 3 months, and I just got some standard pro format thing. Sounded like a very cut and paste thing. And it was definitely on the behalf of our Governor General. I don't know whether he'd been the one that penned the words, but it said that His Excellency has asked me to send you this email. And it says that we don't keep copies of the oath that Scott swore, and you should just try the Parliament. So to me, that was it could very well be true, but it was a handballing of the situation back to Scott's office. And I thought it's weird that the Governor General doesn't keep a copy of our Prime Minister's oath, even though he was there. Why didn't he get it in duplicate or something, you know? He was there. Why didn't he get a photocopy of it or a photograph of it even? So in beginning to doubt the powers, you will find out so much stuff for yourself, you know? So really, I think it's our strategy, you know? So here's another reason to doubt the powers. And this is a big one you'll notice, certainly with the QR code thing, is that if a corporation or company has been given a directive by Parliament that takes away your rights, it's another reason to doubt the powers, isn't it? You want to see the piece of legislation that is driving this company to take your personal information, making it mandatory. You want to have a look at that. You know, don't just let them tell you that they've got that directive. You want to see it for yourself. Ask them to send you an email. Show me what that says. Then you'll find out what's driving the business to do what they're doing. You know, and then you can push it further up the chain and say, look, who passed this law? What is this a law, or is this just a directive, or is it a shall or a should? You know, and you don't know anything about this. And often the people at the front of the shop that's asking you to check in don't know that they're carried on the emotions of the situation. They don't know the actual facts in the law. So they might have got the impression that it's absolutely 100% mandatory, but it could be optional. Or it might be a should, but it's not a shall, you know. So in doubting the powers, you'll go back and find out, look, what does it actually say? What's the wording in the legislation that's being driven from that end, you know? And then once you get a copy of it, you know, share it around, get some information flowing, you know? So really, I think doubting the powers is going to be a practical next step for most people, I think, you know? Just asking questions, jumping on the phone, being willing to send an email, asking what's your lawful basis to do what you're doing, you know? And querying these things. You know, you don't even have to be nasty about it, you know? You don't have to be aggressive in any way. And I think the more nice you are about it, I think that's actually a great strategy. You know, the more nice you are asking these questions, it actually unhinges these people. Especially if you're dealing with the bully, you know, if you're asking him nicely and just playing dumb, then you're going to notice something about him. You know, if you're getting angry and upset, then you're playing on turf that he's well versed in how to deal with, you know, especially he might then question what's your agenda, you know. But if you just say, look, I'm just an interested student of the law. I just love the law. I'm very interested in what's happening here and the mechanics of the whole situation, learning about COVID. You just say, look, I'm just doing a research project on how you guys are managing COVID, and I wanted to see the legislation you guys are working with, and show me what you got there, you know, and let me read it for myself. Can I have a copy, please? Oh, why can't I have a copy? Is it secret? Is it, you know, and then you just play dumb, and you'll get so much more information out of these people, and you'll be able to become pretty much doing what I'm doing here today, telling your friends about the stuff you're finding, you know. And a few weeks ago, I think I did a video, certainly said on a video a couple of times, or a couple of videos. G'day guys from the UK, nice to see you. Good to see some hands across the sea yet again, it's nice. So in terms of what's going on, you know, you asking questions is going to be your way through. And I rang up, as I said, Daniel Andrews' office, this chief dictator in Victoria. You know, if you've not heard of Daniel Andrews, I'd be surprised. But if you're from England, maybe you've heard about the lockdowns in Victoria and the the crazy stuff that was going on there, acting way beyond his enumerated powers. This is what these guys do. They get in there, get up. I think he's a Fabian socialist, really, because he's acting that way. You know what Fabian socialists are? These guys that get into positions of power, just acting, slinking in there, getting put into a position of power and looking for their perfect moment. But then when they get their perfect moment, they hit really, really hard. They just absolutely whoop it. And Daniel Andrews has been that kind of guy, exactly that sort of person. But, ringing up his office, I just wanted to find out, dumb questions here. Reading our Constitution, the way it tells you the truth, the people are supreme. These guys are public servants. They're not public masters. So I rang up his office and I just thought, this is going to be fun. And I spoke to the young lady or the lady there. I said, is this Daniel Andrews' office? Yes, it is. I said, are you guys public servants? Just want to ask a few questions. I put it this way, and you do it this way. You just say, I'm wanting to ask a few questions. I'm interested in what's happening and learning about the law, how it all works. I just wanted to know, are you guys public servants or public masters? And she said, I don't know what you're asking. And I said, and I thought, I've got to try and explain it another way just in case she doesn't understand what I'm saying, but I'm sure she understands what I'm saying. And I said, is the Victorian government the boss of the Victorian people? Like telling the Victorian people what to do, acting as like controllers of the Victorian people? Or are they public servants, like, acting as in a serving type capacity? And she said, I can't answer to your question. How about you send me an email or send us an email? Maybe you can send it to the Premier himself, And I thought, here they are. These people are deflecting. And in just that phone call, you can find out how they're going to respond to you. And if they're cagey, they've got something to hide. If they can't tell you a straight answer, then they're not telling you the truth, or they've got something to hide, or they're trying to use secrecy as their cover to make you think that you are under their control, And we've got to be able to vet out these people that have basically been schoolyard bullies looking for a job, and then, I'll join the cops so I can be paid to bully people. That's what they do. Or that they work themselves into legislation. Some of these people that have gone through, strange childhood, some of these people, and they've got an axe to grind with society. And so when they get their opportune moment in power, they kind of take it back on people, the things that they once endured as a kid. Some of this strange stuff, if you're into psychology, you'll know what I'm talking about. But that's what they do. And they get very insecure when you start questioning their authority or their lawful basis. And they get angry even, So really, if you start to question their lawful basis, I think this is going to be the population strategy without a fight, but just begin to put pressure on the powers that are there to find out whether they are really powers or just, bluff. This is what we've got to determine. Is this powers that have been enumerated? When were they enumerated? With what, parameters? Or is this bluff? You can't have what they're doing, which is like using their powers and then bluff, creating a few legitimate laws and then a stupid one, or an unlawful one, which is what they're doing. Here's a quote from Chief Justice Marshall in the USA. And in our Constitution here in Australia, when they wrote the Constitution, they basically tried to make it state of the art from all of the learnings at the time from England. Most of it's from there, but they grabbed some from the USA, and they grabbed some case law. They grabbed some stuff from Canada, I believe. But there's some quotes in the Constitution, in our annotated Constitution from 1901, in Quick and Grand's annotated Constitution. It gives you a lot of background as to why they've said what they've said and why they've chosen things that they've chosen. Even though the annotations aren't law, they give you at least the founding perspective on what they were thinking at the time. And so I have here, I've written down, we have a lawful right to doubt the powers. So this is a quote from Chief Justice Marshall in the USA, and I think it was around the 1800s. He was very, very well loved, I think, that Chief Justice Marshall, even though he hadn't actually come from much of a law background. He just sort of had an affinity for it, I think, and he had some insight. So every power, this is what he says, every power alleged to be vested in the national government. So this is a claim to power, for example. Every power that is alleged to be vested in the national government or any organ thereof must be affirmatively shown to be granted. There is no presumption in favour of the existence of a power. On the contrary, the burden of proof lies on those who assert its existence to point out something in the Constitution which either expressly or by necessary implication confers it. So what he's saying here, that there's no, you don't ever presume that powers have been granted to the Parliament to do anything, you know, or to anyone for anything, you know. In fact, it's the opposite. The burden of proof is on them to show you how they got what they got, where they're drawing the source of power from, you know. And this is what we need to do in doubting the powers. What happens is that you begin to shift from you being the subject under what they're saying, is that you begin to use your executive rights and supreme rights to begin to question, but to put the burden of proof back on them and say, you show me where you got your powers, you know. And there's a shift in the powers of that conversation even, you know, that you've got to tell me, you know. And so when I questioned that lady in Victoria that works for Daniel Andrews in his office, and I said, are you guys public servants or public masters? I was very simply assessing, are you guys over the top of us or are you guys underneath us? And it straight away put an awkwardness into the conversation that she wasn't able to account for. You know, it's no use talking about arguing over the bill that Daniel Andrews is proposing or whatever, or how serious whatever the allegations that he's saying about certain. It doesn't matter until you establish the foundations of the relationship, you know. What is the social contract that we have with this Parliament in Victoria? Are you guys over the top of us? Or are you guys acting as our agent, as a derivative of the will of the people, so you're a public servant, you know? And they hate that question. These bullies, they hate that question because they can't tell you that they're public masters. They can never tell you that, because then you straight away would say, look, well, where did you get the power to tell me that? You're not that. They don't know what you know either. This is the other thing, is it? They don't know what you know. So if you begin to doubt their powers and you just ask these basic questions, you could be full of knowledge and they would be in for a very hard time with you. They would hate having a conversation with you. But you need to do it, because it just actually unhinges these bullies, you know, from what they're doing. So, you know, really, if you start asking questions and do it nicely, and I believe the niceness that you do it in, and the honest, I mean, obviously honesty, be honest, you know, because they'll sniff you out if you're not honest. These guys are professional liars, so they can tell if you're telling them a lie, you know, or if you're being cagey about something, you know. So, but you need to question. Just ask the questions. Right, who gave you lawful basis? Did you swear the lawful oath? Show me where you swore the lawful oath. And they might say, look, we don't have time for that right now. Or say, well, look, yes, you do, because you're not arresting me if you're not actually in lawful position to do so, you know? So here's the thing. You know, we're not going down to the cop shop if you're not a cop. or if you're not sworn in lawfully, or if you're not obeying something that the people have given you the powers to do. So we're not going to the cop shop. That's it. It's game over. Here's the thing, and put the burden of proof back on them. Rather than arguing over all the legislation that they want to get you bamboozled with, just go straight for undercutting. Go straight to the foundations and say, look, who gave you this right? Who are you? How do I know you're not an imposter in a police uniform? How do I know you don't work for the Chinese government? How do I know? Show me for sure. Prove it to me that you are not an agent of Satan. That's it. But really, if we can't detect this, then we don't deserve our society like our freedoms, do we? If we can't detect the frauds that are amongst us, then all of our rights and privileges are just, what's the point of them? But this is the bit for us to do, is be able to sniff these guys out and put stack loads of pressure on them just by asking honest questions, and if they're stuck in the system that they're being forced to do too. This is the thing. Some of these cops have been in the system for so long, and the system's changing on them, and they're still, kind of stuck in the thing because they've got all their long service leave and all this stuff, and they don't like their job anymore, and they're angry with what's going on, but they can't change anything. In effect, if you're nice about it and just doubt the powers, I believe you're going to stand the best chance of getting out of whatever you've been accused of, Get them on side. These people are normal. A lot of them are normal people too, They're not all bullies, but some of them are. So you've got to be able to sift them out, I believe. So in doubting the powers is very important. I'll read a little bit more of what this Chief Justice Marshall said. And welcome to everyone who's joined the video. I notice there's quite a few there now, and if you're first time on Shed Gospel, welcome, and hopefully you had a nice Christmas. So I'm just reading a bit more from Chief Justice Marshall. He says, just as an agent claiming to act on behalf of his principal must make out by positive evidence that his principal gave him the authority he relies on, so Congress, or those who rely on one of its statutes, are bound to show that the people have authorized the legislature to pass the statute. Here's the thing, isn't it? It's really important. This is what this guy said back in the 1800s. He said, look, if Congress has to prove that they have the lawfulness to pass the statute, that they've been granted the powers by the people to do it, This is America. This is the same here in Australia. It's exactly the same. If the powers have not been conferred to them by the people through referendum or the Constitution, they don't have the powers to do any of this stuff. In doubting the powers, the emergency powers, really you've got to get right into it. Look, what constitutes an emergency? Who gave you these powers? When did the people give you these powers? Regardless of the emergency. And it feels wrong to do it, even in the COVID situation, because many people will persecute you for doubting the powers in this situation. They'll just want the government to have all the powers that they need to make the virus go away so we can get back to what we used to be doing. That's what the people will want to do, and they will even jump up against you and say, look, how dare you question the government at this time? How dare you undercut the government's powers at this time? You are the problem, and people will then turn on you and persecute you. But your basis for questioning the powers is very, very legitimate. It's very, very lawful to do so. And it's very important that you do it in this type situation with this pandemic, is because if you've never enumerated to your parliament the powers to have powers in an emergency, then they're acting already beyond the powers granted. And how do you know that this situation is not going to turn into an absolute nightmare where you're never going to be free of the situation? They will define then the terms on which you live. They will suspend your rights, and then you're agreeing to something that you've never given them the power to make the deal on in the first place. This is the real problem, and this is why why I've said maybe the last video on the quarantine one. I said, look, if they're not obeying the Constitution now, if they haven't sworn the lawful oath now, if they're not obeying what the Constitution says on the way that the states are not to be quarantining, but the federal is. If they're not doing that now, then any emergency powers that they're claiming, how do you know that this is not a ruse to further disobey the Constitution, further strip you of your rights, and to facilitate a national takeover? This is the real reality that I think many of us are seeing, you know. So in doubting the powers, you have to get back to the it's all foundational. This stuff is just foundational. So you don't argue on the premises that they want you to argue on. You argue on the foundation in which you should even be talking to them or not. You know, so if they've got no lawful basis to tell you anything, then you don't even need to listen, you know. So just go straight for that, the powers. Go straight for what powers they're saying that they have to tell you what they're telling you, you know. So they want to get you flustered and stressed out about all the guff that they want you to do, you know. But you change the game and chuck the burden of proof back on them and say, look, you tell me what lawful basis do you have to tell me anything? When did we give you the powers for emergency powers? Show me a legislation you stand on. Show me how your, you know, state of emergency or whatever, how even your biosecurity emergency or whatever it is has been proclaimed. Show me how on earth you have the powers to proclaim that. Show me if you're sitting lawfully to proclaim that, you know. Show me how this works, whether this applies to everybody or just to selected individuals. This is all foundational, but you've really got to get back and ask all these basic questions like, well, look, does the Biosecurity Act and all of the emergency situation, does it apply to everyone unilaterally without distinction, or does it apply to individuals? What's the basis for this legislation? Because is it quarantine, or what is this? You know, what is this legislation drawing its powers from? Is it in the Constitution or only half in the Constitution? So, you know, really, I've just think the strongest thing we can do, if you really want to get into it, the strongest thing we can do is actually to just begin to doubt their powers and not be rude, but just say, look, show me in the law where you got this. Show me where the people gave, this is the biggest one. Show me where the people gave you this power. You know, don't even show me in your legislation how you got the powers from what your act that you created gave you. Show me where the people conferred you these powers in the beginning. And if they can't do that, then you've got them, don't you? You know, you've got the upper hand straight away. And it's just a real reminder that you are supreme, because you are. If you're in the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia, you are supreme. Why are you supreme? It's because our English law roots and our Christian law roots in England so deem people as being so supreme that God would send his own son to die for these people. So if God would send his own son to die for everybody, then the value of humanity is up there, you know. All of this stuff makes sense, you know. Hope that makes sense to you. So it really does to me. So they have it is their job, the legislators' job, to find out the lawful basis on which they propose their legislation. It's not your job. But because they're not doing their job properly, and the worse it is to a degree, it's not good, none of it's good, but in some ways the worse it is, that the more obvious it gets as to how unlawful it is and how it affords no obedience, you know. And the further that it is from the Constitution actually gives you an advantage to show, look, that's not even in the Constitution. You want to take me to court? Well, look, you're gonna be paying for all the court fees because, you know, you've got no basis. You don't. At all. None of yous. Yous are all sitting there unlawfully. You're acting ultra vires. So, you know, and I hope this video tonight's been eye-opening, but empowering, you know. Something you can do today is begin to doubt the powers. Ask the questions. You know, if the policeman wants to detain you, excuse me, am I being detained for a crime? Did I commit a crime today? You know, what's the crime I've just committed here? Well, we've got you on suspicion. Okay, on what reasonable grounds have you got me on suspicion? I'm just interested. What is it? You know? And then on what legislation are you deriving these suspicions from? And this is why you need to know, is because in China, I can guarantee you, they don't do any of this stuff. And if you look at a policeman funny in China, they'll lock you up, or take your organs for organ harvesting type thing. This is the danger that we're in here in Australia, is that if we don't doubt the powers, then we'll be giving these guys a chance in our country, and we can't afford to let them do it. And I believe if you begin to question, this is what I believe as a Christian, this is what I believe, that truth, see, these guys will be forced to tell you a lie, which you'll tell straight away is a lie, or they'll be forced to tell you the truth, but the truth is actually going to unhinge them. And this is part of the move thing. I believe it's a move of God here in Australia. I'm a Christian, okay, so very loud and everything about my faith in God, but I believe it's so important and crucial that our nation doesn't go down the drain, that we don't lose the foundations of our country, that we don't go backwards, and that we don't allow these creeps to ruin our country in trust. We're trusting them that they're doing the right thing. We're trusting that they're all holding each other accountable, but it's high time that we do an audit, And one person told me when I was working back for other people in my last job, they said to me, and I was in like a quality control type job, they said to me, inspect what you expect. So what they said was inspect what you expect. Meaning, if you expect a good outcome from this supplier, then you need to go and check it out and make sure that they're going to deliver you exactly what they said they were going to deliver you. Make sure that they're doing it to the contract, And if you've ever dealt with corporations and companies, they will pay their lawyers to tell you lies, and to get out of anything that they want to get out of. So you've got to go there and physically check it out for yourself to make sure that they're doing what you agreed to do what the contract was all about, And if you just let them go and do it, we've had situations in one of my places of employment where if we didn't push the point that we have a delivery date, we're the ones with the pressure here in our company, and you guys are supplying us the parts, and yet you guys aren't going to even deliver on time, then it's going to wreck our contract. And so you have to put the pressure back on the supplier to say, look, you agreed to it on this time, you're going to deliver it on time, and it's going to be the way that it's meant to be. And you've got to physically go and meet with them and go and, again, shake hands and say, look, it is going to be right, isn't it? And make sure. But our parliaments have been acting, and police forces and the judiciary have been acting so independent for so long, making things up as they go and in collusion with one another, that we have a real fight on our hands to go and unhinge them from acting like a boys club, which they do, and covering for each other and having all these fringe benefits on the side and not acting in our interest. And we get upset that they're not doing things for us, when part of our problem is we're not checking up on them. We're not finding out, are they really doing it the way that the law says? Are they obeying what the law says to do? Or are they just making it up as they go? Or are they rewriting the laws without our approval? Or are they claiming powers that they didn't get given by the people? All these basic questions are so crucial that we have to go back with a little bit of a microscope sometimes and make sure that they're doing it right. And if they're not doing it right, then you know what? Our own system, if you put enough pressure on it, our own system will begin to freak out. And they should, because they're supposed to be holding each other accountable, And when the people step in and we have our right to defend ourselves against tyranny, which we should have in Australia. But, one of our things that we've got to do before we think about anything else, is begin to just doubt their powers. Ask the questions. Ask them on the phone. Send it on the phone's probably just as good, because you can really tailor your questions to how they're speaking to you, and start, do it in writing if you need to as well, because then you've got written records also of what you're sending to them, as far as evidence that these guys are doing the wrong thing, and we need to build up a stack load of evidence, to see what on earth is going on, and if they're acting with foreign powers, we need to actually hold them to account, doing these public videos like I've been doing, I actually tagged Daniel Andrews, his Facebook, it's only a small thing, but I tagged Daniel Andrews in the posts that I make about him, so he can see that there's been thousands and thousands of people that are holding, certainly bearing me witness, but the fact that I'm showing him the Constitution and how he's disobeying it, I tag him in these posts, It's not the only way of going about this stuff, but, we can raise awareness and get some boldness, encouraging one another, that it's within our biblical rights. If you need to find out some biblical basis, even if you're not a Christian, I can tell you the Bible gives you every confidence that you can certainly drive the devil out of your own life, drive the lies out. Talking about lies and truth here, The Bible talks about telling the truth, doesn't it? Telling the truth to other people. That's important, to tell other people the truth, and but to speak truth to them, don't tear the living daylights out of them. Just tell them the truth and believe that God's going to work with what you're saying to begin to, crumble the foundations of lies and the barrage and all of the bullying techniques. Here's the other thing. As Christians, we're supposed to stand up to bullying, aren't we? We're not to be intimidated. The Bible clearly tells us, fear not, doesn't it? It says to be strong and to be very courageous, doesn't it? It gives us no excuse for backing down just because somebody else looks intimidating, or does it? The Bible also tells us that to not have respect of persons in judgment, doesn't it? The Bible tells us don't care whether he's the Prime Minister or the Governor General or anybody. Certainly don't abuse them, but at the same time, don't close your eyes to a breach of the law or the Constitution just because they're the Prime Minister, Hold them to account, from the least to the greatest. Jesus was the same, wasn't he? And John the Baptist was the same. John the Baptist spoke some very, very, very strong things against the establishment, Jesus did too. Jesus was chewed up and spat out by the religious leaders, and the Old Testament prophets, they spoke very strong things. And the psalmist, David, spoke some very, very strong things that I wouldn't even be confident to say to people, But this is the thing, that if somebody's going to do the wrong thing to you, they have to do it fully knowing that they are doing the wrong thing. You've got to break the deception that's over their minds, of just going along with the flow, And if these people are entrenched in their job and have never thought about the truth, you coming along from the outside might be just God's voice to them to say, look, check out the foundations on which you're basing your legislation. Is it not right? If it's not right, then don't sign off on it, Don't put your name to a treasonous oath or to a treasonous piece of law, because then your name's implicated. You don't want to go down to jail with your mates if they're doing the wrong thing, they're not really your mates, are they, And starting to talk like this, I believe we can start to do this with outside the courts, not committing any crimes. In fact, it's our lawful right to doubt the powers that they say that they have. The Bible says that all the powers are ordained of God, doesn't it? If we want to quote Romans 13, we've got to be sure, we've got to rightly divide the word of God too. That if Romans 13 doesn't apply to Australia, because they're not over us positionally, they're our servants, they're our representatives. If Romans 13 is not saying that these guys are in position over the top of us, We've got to rightly divide the word of God. We've got to know that that part of the word of God applies to dictatorships, which we don't have. We're not a dictatorship here. But the Bible also says that in Romans 13, if people want to quote that as though that's what we're living in, which we're not, but if they do, the Bible says that there are no powers that are except those which are ordained of God. So we have to be able to determine those who are in power. Because if someone's sitting in that chair as an imposter, they're not in power. Even though they might be wielding the big stick, they're not in power, really. We've got to be able to determine those who are frauds and fakes. And that's our job, And we've got to be able to speak the truth to them, And even if we're dragged before them in the courts, we've still got to do it with some boldness and not care, to a degree. Because why do we not care? Because if you're a Christian like I am, you have a mandate by God to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. You have a mandate by God to see to it that God's kingdom is coming and that all of the earth looks like heaven on earth. When you read the Bible, that's what it tells you to do. It's not giving you the excuse. Just because you're a Christian doesn't give you the excuse to walk away from tyrannical liars that are in elected positions, You can be God's mouthpiece to them if you so care about our nation, like I do. And this is the thing, you're caring about the world in which your children are going to grow up in and the world in which your fellow man lives in, your next door neighbour, You might be able to stand up and save a disaster from happening by, people not being able to do things to you or to your neighbourhood simply because you're standing up because you know the truth and that you're not going to budge. You're not going to be intimidated, So I believe this is the power that we have, is to put the burden of proof back on them, Make them explain themselves, and keep asking those questions as God gives you the wisdom to ask more questions of them, So God bless you, friends. I see there's been a bazillion comments on this video, which is pretty good. I'm going to enjoy reading all those. And thanks everybody who's tuned in tonight. And just may God bless your Christmas, New Year break. And we're going to fight them on the beaches, aren't we? These guys, these creeps. We're going to fight them on the beaches because really the earth is the Lord's, the Bible says, and the fullness thereof. So we work as unto God, and we just pray that those people that are in these positions ultimately would give their hearts to God and not find themselves on the wrong side of the Almighty God forever in hell, And that's it. Show people that you love them by being true and being truthful, because it might snap them out of their stupor that they live in. God bless you, friends, and just wanted to be a blessing to you. And if you want to, by all means, as I say, share these videos, get them out, spreading around so people can see the truth and begin to find out for themselves and be empowered in Jesus' name. God bless you guys. See you later. Bye.